Do you ever look around your life and wonder, why don't I feel more fulfilled? Like, things aren't necessarily falling apart. Maybe you have a decent job, a home, a relationship, maybe even kids or some savings. And yet there's this strange emptiness you can't quite explain. You're not ungrateful. You know you're lucky in many ways. But still, there's that dull ache, like something's missing. And the weird part? You can't even name what it is. If that resonates, you're not alone. This video isn't about fixing your life from the outside. It's about the quiet shifts that need to happen inside. The ones no one really talks about when you hit your 30s or 40s and suddenly realize that checking all the boxes didn't actually make you feel whole. Because here's the truth. Many of us were told that life was a checklist. Education, job, partner, kids, house, retirement plan. But no one warned us about what comes after we start ticking those boxes. No one talks about the internal dissonance, that quiet hum of "is this it?" that starts to follow you around like background noise. That hum gets louder around 35. Or for some, even earlier. So today I want to have a real conversation about that. Not from a place of judgment, not from a here's how to be more productive place either, but from a space of honesty. Because I've been there too. I've sat in my car in a parking lot after work, staring at the steering wheel, thinking, this isn't what I imagined. I've gone through the motions, smiled at the right moments, checked in on others, all while quietly feeling like I was disappearing in my own life. And I know many of you have felt that too. So in this video, we're going to talk about 5 inner shifts that made a real difference for me. Not overnight, not perfectly, but they were the things that helped me reconnect with something deeper. Something real. Not happiness on the surface, but a sense of peace that finally started to settle in, one layer at a time. Let's start with the first shift, and it might sting a little. We have to stop living life on someone else's timeline. I know, that sounds obvious, but take a minute. Think about how many choices you've made because you felt like you should. Maybe you took a job because it made sense on paper. You got married because it was time. You bought the house, had the kid, said yes to the promotion. All the while ignoring the quiet voice inside that was saying, this doesn't feel like me. And it's not your fault. Most of us were taught to make safe, respectable, grown-up decisions. But what we weren't taught was how to listen to ourselves. We weren't taught to check in with our inner compass. So what happens? By the time we hit our mid-30s, our lives are full, but we feel empty. And the gap between the life we built and the one we actually want starts to feel unbridgeable. And here's the hard truth. It's not going to close itself. You can keep going through the motions for another decade. Many do. But if you're watching this video, part of you knows that's not what you want. The shift comes when you start giving yourself permission to redefine success. Not as a number in your bank account or the title next to your name, but as how connected you feel to your own life. For me, that started small, saying no to things that drained me, letting go of the idea that my worth was tied to my productivity, learning how to sit in stillness without feeling guilty. That brings me to the second shift, learning how to feel again. I don't just mean being in touch with your emotions, I mean actually letting yourself feel what you've been suppressing. The boredom, the resentment, the grief for the life you thought you'd have. A lot of people hit 35 and realize they're emotionally numb. They function, they perform, they show up, but underneath that, they haven't really felt in years. Why? Because it was easier not to. Feeling takes energy. It's messy. It interrupts your to-do list. And most of us were taught that being tough means not letting things get to us. But stuffing it down doesn't make it disappear. It just makes it come out sideways. In burnout, disconnection, anxiety that shows up at 2 a.m. for no reason. What helped me begin to reconnect was therapy, but also journaling, walking in silence, talking to friends in honest ways, not just surface talk about work or kids, but the real stuff. The stuff that feels awkward at first, but healing over time. Sometimes the emptiness isn't because you're broken, it's because you've stopped letting yourself feel fully alive. And you can't feel fully alive if you're disconnected from your own heart. One small moment that cracked something open for me was sitting with a friend at lunch one day. I was venting about how tired and directionless I felt, and I said, I don't even know what I want anymore. And she looked at me and said, "It's not that you don't know. You just haven't given yourself the space to hear it." That sentence stuck with me. So if you feel empty, try asking yourself, when was the last time I made space to really listen to myself? Not just in the cracks between meetings or when the kids are asleep, but real time, real attention. That leads into another quiet shift, one I didn't expect, but that changed everything when I started practicing it. That shift I was starting to mention, it's gonna sound simple, maybe even too simple, but here it is. You have to stop outsourcing your worth. I mean it. So many of us, without realizing it, hand over our self-worth to everything outside of us. Our job title, our relationship status, our kids' behavior. How many people liked our post, whether our boss is happy, whether our parents approve. And for a while, it might feel like it's working. The praise hits, you get that compliment. Someone tells you you're so put together. And for a few moments, you feel okay again. But then something slips, you mess up, someone gets disappointed, or maybe no one says anything at all. And suddenly, the silence feels like proof that you're not doing enough, not being enough. This constant chase for validation, it's exhausting. And more than that, it's fragile. Because the moment your self-worth is tied to something outside of you, you're always one setback away from falling apart. That emptiness you feel? Sometimes it's the echo of all the parts of yourself you've muted to be acceptable to others. I remember vividly when I realized how deep this went for me. I was scrolling through job listings I didn't even want, fantasizing about a new role that might finally make me feel legit. And then it hit me. I don't want a new job. I want to feel like I matter. That moment cracked something open, because chasing worth is very different from building it. Building it means learning how to value yourself. Even when no one's clapping, even when things are quiet, even when you're not being productive, charming, or impressive. That's hard. Especially when you've spent years performing a version of yourself you thought people needed you to be. But it's also the beginning of something real. When you stop chasing external validation, you start discovering what actually fills you. Which leads to another unexpected truth. Fulfillment doesn't always feel the way you thought it would. So many people chase some idealized version of happiness. The beach house, the passive income, the picture-perfect mornings with green smoothies and sunrise yoga. And hey, if that's your thing, amazing. But for most of us, real peace looks a lot more ordinary and a lot more subtle. It looks like waking up and not dreading your day. It looks like being able to sit in your own company without feeling restless. It looks like having one or two people in your life you can be totally real with. But you don't get there by running harder. You get there by slowing down. Enough to ask yourself, what would a peaceful life actually look like for me? Not on Instagram, but in my actual daily rhythm. And when I started asking myself that question, everything shifted. For me, it wasn't about quitting my job or moving to the mountains or having some epic breakthrough. It was small, quiet things. Creating boundaries that let me breathe. Learning how to say no without apology. Taking a walk every evening without my phone. Reconnecting with music I loved when I was younger. Tiny changes, but they made space. And that space allowed me to reemerge, the version of me that existed before the world told me who I should be. It reminded me that sometimes what we're calling emptiness is really just an overcrowded life with no room for authenticity. And that brings me to something a little more tender, and for a lot of people, a little scary. The truth is, we avoid that emptiness because deep down, we're afraid of what we might find inside it. Because if we stop being busy, if we stop performing, stop pleasing, stop fixing, stop striving, what's left? That's the question most of us don't want to face, because we're afraid the answer will be nothing. That if we stop doing, we'll disappear. But what I've found, and maybe you're starting to feel this too, is that when you finally make space for stillness, what you find isn't nothing. It's you. Not the curated version. Not the edited resume or the parent of the year or the workhorse or the best friend who never needs anything. But the real you. The one who has needs. Who has passions that maybe you buried under responsibility. Who still has dreams, even if they feel a little out of reach. Who wants more, not more stuff, but more connection, more truth, more meaning. You can't outsource that. You can't rush that. You can only return to it, patiently, one choice at a time. And sometimes that return starts with simply being honest. I'm not okay, I'm not fulfilled, and I want something deeper. Not in a dramatic midlife crisis way, but in a clear, courageous way. Because it takes guts to name what you really want, especially when it's not what everyone else expects you to want. And let's be honest, naming it can feel scary because it forces you to confront the gap between where you are and where you want to be. But here's the good news. You don't have to close that gap in a day or even a year. You just have to start walking, slowly, intentionally, honestly. That might mean having an uncomfortable conversation, or taking a weekend to yourself, or finally booking that therapy session, or asking yourself, what did I love before I got so busy surviving? Whatever it is, the first step isn't changing everything. It's remembering who you are beneath everything. And if there's a small voice inside you whispering that there's more, trust it. Because maybe that emptiness you've been carrying, it isn't proof that something's wrong with you. Maybe it's an invitation, a call back to something you've been missing, not because you're lost, but because you've been looking everywhere except inside. And once you begin that journey inward, things start to shift. So here's where we land. You've spent years, maybe decades, shaping your life into something stable, respectable, responsible. And I want you to know that's no small thing. It takes grit to build a life that functions, especially when the world around you is pulling you in 100 different directions. But here's the deeper question. Is the life you've built still aligned with who you've become? That question isn't about blowing up everything and starting over. It's not about quitting your job tomorrow or leaving your relationship or selling your house and moving to a cabin in the woods. Unless, of course, that's actually what you want. It's about checking in, pausing, asking yourself, is this version of me still true? Because one of the most human things in the world is outgrowing your life, and yet so few people talk about it. We're taught to figure it out by our mid-30s and then just stay the course. But you're not a static being. You're evolving, you're learning, you're changing. And that means your values shift, your desires shift. What once felt like your dream life may now feel like a cage. That doesn't mean you're broken, it means you're alive. So let's talk about what happens next, when you've stopped outsourcing your worth, when you've started listening, when you've created a little space. Here's what often comes up next. Grief. And I don't mean grief just in the traditional sense. I mean the quiet, heavy sadness that hits when you start to realize how long you've lived out of alignment. Maybe you realize you've spent years trying to prove your value to people who never really saw you. Maybe you mourn the time you lost, trying to meet expectations that never truly mattered to you. Maybe you feel regret for ignoring your own needs, or resentment for how much you've had to hold up for others. And that's okay. That's not weakness. That's the cost of waking up. And it's a part of healing that so many people skip because it's uncomfortable. But the truth is, before you can fully step into something new, you have to grieve what you're letting go of. The old roles, the old masks, the old ways of being that once kept you safe, but no longer serve you. Letting go of them doesn't mean they were wrong. It means you're ready for something more honest, more aligned, more you. And once you move through that, or even as you're moving through it, something unexpected starts to happen. You begin to feel lighter. Not because everything is fixed, not because your life is suddenly perfect, but because you're finally being honest with yourself. You're no longer forcing yourself to pretend. You're no longer dragging yourself through days that don't feel like yours. And that honesty, even when it's hard, is freeing. You also start to realize that fulfillment isn't this big moment you finally reach. It's not the book deal, the six-figure income, the soulmate relationship, or the perfect morning routine. Fulfillment is something you build, moment by moment, by showing up in your life with intention, by choosing what aligns and letting go of what doesn't, by asking yourself, does this feel like me? And being brave enough to listen to the answer. And most importantly, by learning how to be deeply kind to yourself in the process. Because here's the truth, this work, this kind of inner shift, it's not linear. You'll have days where you feel clear, strong, connected, and then days where the fog comes back and the old doubts creep in. That's normal. That's part of it. Don't use those moments to beat yourself up. Use them as reminders. Reminders that you're not going back, you're just being human. The emptiness you once feared? It begins to feel less like a void and more like an opening, a space for possibility, a space for something real. And what you'll likely discover, as I did, is that the parts of your life that truly nourish you aren't always flashy or impressive. They're the simple, grounded moments where you feel connected to yourself, to others, to something greater. A quiet coffee alone where you actually enjoy your own company. A hard but honest conversation that brings you closer to someone you love. A creative project you do just for fun, not for praise. A walk at sunset where you let yourself breathe. These are the moments where meaning lives. And they're available to you, even now. So if you've been feeling empty, maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just finally ready to stop living someone else's life. Maybe the numbness was never the problem. Maybe it was the symptom, a signal, a gentle alarm trying to get your attention. And now that you're paying attention, you get to choose differently. Not all at once, but one brave choice at a time. One small shift, one honest conversation, one boundary, 1 hour to yourself, one question asked, not ignored. That's how it starts. And if you're still with me here, if something in your chest has been nodding quietly while you listen, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You're not behind. You're not too late. You're not stuck. You're just at the edge of something real. And that edge, it's where change begins. I'd love to hear what's resonating with you in the comments. What inner shift are you feeling called to make right now? What have you been carrying in silence that needs a voice? If this video spoke to something in you, take a second to like and subscribe, not just to support the channel, but to stay connected to conversations that help you reconnect to you. And remember, even when it feels quiet, even when you're unsure, your life is allowed to change. You are allowed to outgrow what no longer fits. You are allowed to want more, not stuff, but self. And you are allowed to begin again, as many times as it takes. You're not lost, you're just becoming. And honestly, that's a powerful place to be.